Shana Tova. I was really looking forward to the 4th of July this year. Having people over, grilling, the works. And even though I've been feeling kind of run down, I chalked it up to being a busy, tired parent. But I got increasingly worried about, all those symptoms, and I was having some immunocompromised folks over. I wanted to make sure I wasn't sick, didn't want to give anybody anything. So I just booked an appointment at urgent care that day, the 4th, right here, Maryland Plaza, where they said to me, "You have an ear infection, a sinus infection, and the flu." Oh, okay, fine. I had been feeling fairly awful. So I texted everyone to cancel, and the doctor wrote me some prescriptions. I put David back in the car, and off we went to the pharmacy. We're driving down Chimney Rock. It's a drive I've probably done hundreds of times. So I know it really well. I know where the stop signs are, I know where the lights are, and I see a car pull up to a stop sign, and I assume, obviously, he's gonna stop. You can see where this is going. Lord. By the time I realize that he's not stopping, his car's already in front of mine, and it is, of course, too late. I stomp on the brakes, and I don't actually remember the impact itself. The first thing I am cognizant of is the ringing in my ears. And there's this kind of dust in the air. I'd never been in an accident before where the airbags deployed, but apparently there's this powder. So there's airbags everywhere. My ears are ringing. I'm surrounded by airbags and dust, and I'm dazed. And I hear from the back seat, "Ima?" And I say, "I'm coming, Bubba," and I try to force the door open. And I wobble my way to the back. And he's scared, but he looks fine. That car seat did its job. And the days that followed were a mess, of course. I was incredibly busy. Anyone who's been in a car accident, right, you know. Endless calls to multiple people with his insurance, dealing with my insurance, looking for a new used car in this market. Plus, now I had a toddler who thinks every time we get into a car, it's gonna crash. On top of the fact that he still needs me, for everything, every day. It doesn't matter if you've been in an accident, you still gotta do the laundry and the meals and all that stuff, gotta get done. And I remember that week, looking at my calendar, feeling so tired and frazzled, and realizing as I looked at my calendar, I might have made a terrible mistake. Because I saw, looking forward a month after that accident, that I had arranged something that back in the spring seemed like a great idea. And it was now a decision I regretted. Something post-accident that seemed like a pretty dumb idea. I booked a vacation. A vacation! What was I thinking? Well, probably back in the spring, I was thinking I hadn't been on an actual vacation in 2 years. The kind where you go and do fun things and have new experiences and spend time with the people you love. But it wasn't just a vacation. Oh no, in the spring I was ambitious. This was one where it entailed taking my 4-year-old on his first plane ride since the pandemic hit. And to Denver. Then a 2-hour drive to Arapahoe National Forest area, which would entail bringing a bunch of our own supplies, picking up a lot of kosher food, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? My first instinct, when I realized this trip was coming up, was, I gotta cancel. Because I envisioned being on the trip itself, driving to the airport and going through security and being on the plane and getting in the car and all that stuff. And some of you have small children, I can see, or you remember the days when you went on big trips with little people. Do you remember that? Yeah. I was exhausted just thinking about it. And I thought, God, I am already so tired. I have so much to do. Just the amount of work it's going to take to actually pull this trip off And now, on top of all I'm dealing with this car accident, I remember saying to a friend, I really don't know if this juice will be worth the squeeze. And frankly, I remember thinking at one point, probably after doom scrolling on my phone through the news, wow, my life is infinitely harder now, but honestly, I'm going to survive this. It's all going to be fine, but how could I have even considered spending all this money and time and resources to go gallivanting around a national park? I see how incredibly difficult other people's lives are. The amount of true suffering in the world. How can I now be all excited to go on vacation? And I even had the thought. It's not logical, but your thoughts are your thoughts. I had this thought, I am just barely holding it together on a good day. The cleaning and the cooking and the momming and the rabbiing. And now this car accident on top. I feel like I'm not doing stellar in any of those roles. And I think I get to go on vacation. And then I thought about sitting outside in that Colorado air, 70-degree highs, lows in the 30s, surrounded by trees, exploring with my son, looking for animals. He loves animals, and I love him. I love traveling, and it's been such a long time. It was going to be a very hard choice, which is weird. It should be so easy to choose the happy stuff. Happiness and fun and joy. Joy seems like one of those things that's a no-brainer. Everyone wants more of joy, right? And that might be true, but I also think that we, human beings, are really bad at it. I think we're not good at joy. And we are especially not good at joy when times are tough. Which again defies logic. It makes more sense to figure people would seek more joy when they're down, not feeling happy. Seek more happiness. You'd think. But for a lot of us, too many of us, we get into this headspace of, oh, I'm so busy. I have so much to do, and if I don't do it, it won't get done. And doing all the things, that's the most important, more important than having funsies. That would be irresponsible of me to focus on anything other than those things that I need to do. Or sometimes we think, yeah, my life isn't easy, but other people's lives are much harder. Just look at the news. A flood, an earthquake, some horrible human rights abuse. How can I be happy? How can I prioritize joy, my joy, when there's so much suffering out there? Or, and this one is pretty sad, sometimes we get into the mindset that happiness has to be earned. Good things are for good people, and I am just quite not good enough. I talk to people all the time, friends, colleagues, congregants, who, like me, always seem to have a reason to not go after their own joy. They'll help others with theirs, kids, partner, friends, but not their own. I think it's human nature to run away from joy. Because for thousands of years, Judaism at least, has felt the need to push us towards it. Our happiness, we are teaching in our tradition, is important to God. Your happiness is important to God. The Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings we say under the chuppah at a wedding, 2 of them end with essentially the same words, Baruch atah Adonai mesamech hatan v'kala. Blessed are you, Adonai, who causes a couple to rejoice. Rejoicing is a blessing from God, so God wants us to be happy. God craves joy for us, for you. So joy is clearly important, but critically, it's important, especially in the difficult times. And I think that's what makes Judaism so unique, because we know life can be difficult. It always has been. Yet still we must seek joy. The Hasidic Rebbe, the great mystic Nachman of Breslov, famously taught mitzvah gedolah yiyot b'simcha tamid. It is a great mitzvah, it's a great commandment to be in a state of simcha, happiness. It's a very famous saying of his. But do you know the actual circumstances of his life when he was preaching that message, when he came up with it? His life was not easy. He had 6 daughters and 2 sons. 2 of his daughters died in infancy, and both of his sons died before they were 2. Then his wife died of tuberculosis, and he was only in his 30s. Rabbi Nachman was in a very low place. Personal papers from that time reveal, as his family was decimated, that the Rebbe was in a place of deep, deep pain and darkness and sadness and grief. And it was then, as these tragedies befell him, did he teach his famous lesson that the most important mitzvah we have is to find joy. That someone who endured so much and yet could still say, while in that place of deep suffering, I feel my suffering, I'm not ignoring it, yet I am choosing joy as well. That speaks volumes for us in modern times as well. As Jews, we know that no matter how bleak life seems sometimes, we must still seek things like beauty because it has a purpose. Many of the Jewish prisoners in Terezin, the infamous concentration camp, were artists, composers, musicians, painters, poets. Life there was, understandably, appalling. But still today, even though tens of thousands of Jews were murdered there, artists, their art survives, and it's art they created while they were in the camps, imprisoned. They composed beautiful music, they performed on hidden instruments, they wrote poetry with stolen paper. Why? In such darkness. Why? George Horner, a musician who survived Terezin, put it best when he said of their very risky efforts to continue to produce beauty and art while in the camp, I am alive, he said, because of that music. Art and beauty are not a distraction from what's important. They're not a waste of time. Beauty gives us strength to go on, a little flame in a sea of darkness. How is that a waste? And from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov to those imprisoned in the camps, they all show that in this way, joy is its own form of rebellion. Rebellion. It's a way of shouting aloud, hey, I know there's bad stuff out there. I see it. I'm aware of it. And still, I choose beauty. And still, I choose gladness. The world may bear down on you, but it cannot take that away. Your joy, your God-given birthright. Look, I was a little nervous to talk about this. I was thinking to myself, you're going to get up on the bima and use valuable time going on about happiness. Isn't that a little small of a topic for a high holiday sermon? But not when you really think about the true power of joy. If the fact that God literally desires your happiness doesn't convince you, if the fact that everyone, from our famous mystics to survivors of the worst tragedy to befall our people in modern times, all teach that gladness and beauty are yours by right, and the key to enduring life's hardships, doesn't convince you, if none of these facts convince you of the worth of joy and that you are worthy of so much of it, consider the fact that joy galvanizes. It gives us strength to go on for ourselves, yes, when our lives are so hard. And it also gives us the strength to fight for others, for other people, to fight on when the world is so difficult. Celebrated author and speaker Brené Brown says, We can't give people what we don't have. We can't fight for what's not in our hands. And I think what's more, joy reminds us of what we're fighting for, what we want for all other people. If we have no joy in our hearts, how can we bring it to the world? And the world desperately needs more of it. Now, I have to warn you, joy is not easy. We must be very conscientious about it. Many of us have an inner voice that says, we don't have the time, we are undeserving, we are unremarkable. Joy, that kind of joy, so much joy, our joy is just not for us. But here too, Judaism has insight for us. From the Zohar, the classic Kabbalistic text, teaches that if you switch around the letters in the word besimcha, in happiness, you get the word machshava, meaning thought. According to the Kabbalah, this is how we know that the key to happiness is in our minds. It's not a fluke, it's not accidental, it is intentional. We must set our minds to purposefully seek it out. So we have to be very thoughtful about bringing happiness into our lives, thinking, what does happiness mean to you? What brings you joy? Happiness is not something that happens to you. It is something that you make happen. And in that way, I think that to choose joy in such a tough world as the one we live in, to choose joy is an act of bravery. It's bravery. It's to say, yes, not everything in my life might be going exactly the way I want it to be going. And other bad things might happen, but despite that knowledge, I am choosing happiness, not instead of, but in addition to the suffering that is inevitable in this life. And that is so brave. So ask me, did I undertake that Colorado adventure despite all that weighed me down? I did. And was it easy? Not at all. For the record, my son was great on the flight. It was the 2-hour car trip. Put him over the edge. The travel days, if you've traveled with little ones, yeah, you know. Denver International, that airport is no joke. We had way too much luggage and a full flight of stairs up to the house, and I didn't realize until we got there that while I completely overpacked for my son, I neglected to bring half of my own clothes and a jacket. And again, it was in the 30s at night. But ask me if it was worth it to go hiking with my toddler, surrounded by all that natural beauty, all those pine trees, to dip our hands in the clear, cold Monarch Lake, to make dinner outside and to sit there too, with a view of those beautiful Colorado mountains, and to feel that cool breeze, and to hear my son say, "Thank you, Ima, this was the best dinner ever. I love vacations." Yeah, it was worth it. The feeling of being in such a place, doing something that I loved with the little man I loved the most, a place whose beauty makes your jaw drop. I felt re-energized for all the hard work to come. Nafshi eshovev, the psalmist says, it restored my soul. And I almost didn't do it. But I found the courage to make that leap, to make that choice, to go against my inclination even, that told me, oh, I have so much to do and other people are suffering so much and maybe I didn't deserve it, hadn't earned it. I found the courage and I chose happiness. And I hope you do too. To be happy is to be divine. To see beauty is to galvanize your soul against a tough world. You need it. You need it like you need air and food and water. It sustains you. Not just yourself for your own sake, but others too. You build up a reserve of that light and then you pass it along. To seek your own enjoyment is a form of rebellion against all that feels like it wants to drag you down. Finding your happiness rebels against all of that. And in doing so, it means you are incredibly brave too. And you deserve happiness, not as a reward, but simply for being a child of God, for simply existing. For that, you deserve all the happiness in the world. I hope, I pray, as we begin a new Jewish year, that you take the time and space to create more joy for yourself, no matter how difficult your life is right now. And I know for so many of you, it is not easy right now. But you all deserve so much simcha. It is your blessing. It is your birthright. Claim it. It's yours. I wish you a Shana Tova U'Metzuga, a year sweetened with so much beauty and joy. Shana Tova.